Thank you. We'll now move on to item 5.3, which is Notice of Motion 351. Councillor Gill, would you like to briefly introduce this?
Thank you. The state government has passed legislation on the decriminalisation of sex work, and I'm trying to formalise that as something that this council supports. I think that we'll debate that shortly. Also, I'm concerned about the implementation. So the rest of the motion basically looks at what the next steps are and what might be the problems with a general broad legislation where there hasn't been consultation of any great degree, and there hasn't in the community, and there hasn't been much consultation with councils.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Gill. And just for councillors and anyone watching on, the wording has changed slightly from what's published in the agenda. Councillors, this was all circulated to you. One in point 4, I think we've added all local Victorian state politicians instead of all. And there's some other wording tweaks, but I won't read them all out. You've all got those in front of you. So I'll take that as moved by Councillor Gill, and I'm seeking a seconder. Councillor Marr, thank you. Councillor Gill, over to you.
Thank you, and through the chair. Yeah, any other changes were just to improve the grammar, basically. So it's much as it was. The change that the Mayor has pointed out is that we're writing to local politicians and relevant ministers instead of a broader picture. This has been discussed, and I've tried to make this something that's worthwhile before we have a problem. And I see a problem. After the state election, there'll be the beginning of implementation, and we must get the implementation right, or else there will be a backlash from our community based on misinformation, based on information that is not complete and will lead to conjecture. So what I'm trying to make sure is that politicians come back and look at this and say to us exactly how we're going to do this, because people come to the council and say, you're approving sex work in our community, whereas what we're doing is implementing a state government legislation and trying to make it work properly. And the first part of this motion is to agree with the intent. The second parts of it, and the rest of it really, is to try to make sure that this works. So I'm happy to hear people's opinions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gill. Councillor Marr.
Thank you. Through the Mayor, I'll reserve my right for now. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Marr. Is there any councillor wishing to speak against the motion? Councillor Holland.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to trigger debate, and what I would like Councillor Gill to cover in his closing remarks is, in point 1 of his notice of motion, he speaks to the intent of state legislation to decriminalise sex work. I'd just like him to explain in his closing remarks what he believes the intent of the state legislation is. I think that would be helpful in us making up our minds on this matter. Points 2, 3 and 4 I do agree with, so perhaps if he can provide some clarity around that in his closing debate, that would be good. I'm not sure what the intent of this state government is with this legislation. I've heard many different views. One view put is just to wedge political opposition. I mean, I don't know what they're trying to get at with this or why it's necessary, and maybe Councillor Gill can speak to that. But points 2, 3 and 4 I can see merit behind those. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Holland. Is there any councillor wishing to speak in favour? Councillor Shelley.
Thank you, and I thank Councillor Gill for bringing this on before us. I think it's very important that we do have a look at the, not so much the intent of the state legislation, but also the implementation of this legislation rolling out across the Mornington Peninsula Shire. I had a brief look. For me, I looked at it from a planning scheme and a planning legislation reform, and when I had a quick look at the schedules of where all the different schedules across the peninsula, there was the not permitted uses within that particular zoning, and you had sort of brothels, and then obviously they were struck out because they will be permissible across all locations in any settings across the peninsula. And I think it's our right to question how the implementation will roll out, especially from a planning scheme perspective as well. For example, in the Green Wedge, in certain overlays, in certain schedules, they've crossed out brothel, and yet you can't have a cinema there or some other sort of public venue or event place. And I think we just need to understand the rationale from the government in regards to these decisions, especially through the planning scheme reform as well, which is important. But I'd also like to move an amendment at point 4. And I move this amendment in reading the officer's comment that they're actually going to bring a briefing to us so that we can do an advocacy letter to the state government, putting forward our concerns in regards to the implementation. And I just want to add at point 4 that following the council briefing on Tuesday, 2nd August 2022, that council write to all Victorian state politicians expressing these views and asking for replies. The reason I want to move this amendment is because I think we can refer all of this to that date point, and these concerns can also be included in those discussions.
All right, so I'll just make sure that we've got that captured, and I'm going to have to take that first chunk of that as being your speech on the substantive motion. But
Yeah, sure.
the August the 2nd, I believe it was.
2nd of August 2022. It's coming to the council briefing.
Okay, so councillors, are you all comfortable with what the amendment is that's being proposed? So just for the intent, I guess it's saying that that briefing would inform the letters, I suspect, yep. Okay, so that amendment's being moved by Councillor Shelley, and I'm seeking a seconder. Councillor McCafferty, thank you. Councillor Shelley, did you wish to speak to your amendment?
No, I briefly spoke to it, moving this amendment because I just, in reading the officer's comment, I know that they have heard the councillors' concerns about the implementation of the change to the legislation and what that will mean for our community. We want to make sure that we understand the impacts on our community, and also that we can educate our community as well on these reforms too. And that I think if we just, channel it all down to Tuesday, the 2nd of August briefing, we can roll this NOM into that briefing as well, and look at the advocacy letter that the officers will bring for us for comment and feedback, and we can roll it all up in that advocacy letter and write our concerns to the state government.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Shelley. Councillors, just on the screen, so obviously if this amendment gets up, we'll replace 4 with what's below. We're just trying to catch up on the minutes. Councillor McCafferty, did you wish to speak?
Yes, thank you, and through you, Mayor Marsh. Only just to echo what Councillor Shelley has said, and that I think that by delaying it to the 2nd of August, it gives us an opportunity to have, quite a robust discussion about how we would like that, what we would like to be in the content of that letter and the context and the tone and everything. I think that it will give us an opportunity for us to sort of flesh that out and write that together. So I supported it for that reason.
Thank you, Councillor McCafferty. Any councillor wishing to speak against the amendment? Councillor Holland.
Thank you, Mayor. I can't support the amendment. I don't see why there's any reason to delay writing to local state politicians and relevant ministers. I think we should be doing that now. If this substantive motion is passed, then hopefully we can get a response from them before we actually have a briefing, and then we can write to them again. I don't see any reason why we would delay writing to them to seek more information, to seek their views and opinions, and then if necessary we can always write to them again. There's no reason to limit ourselves or to delay that sort of advocacy. It can happen straight away, so I won't be voting in favour of the amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Holland. Any councillor wishing to speak in favour of the amendment? Against? Councillor Gill. No, not yet. Did you want to speak against the amendment or to the amendment?
My
Take
view,
those as a
my,
yes.
my view is similar to Councillor Holland's. We can do both. We don't need to delay, and we could write again with more information. But I don't mind. You know, it's not a crucial issue to our points. So I'm happy whichever way it goes. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gill. Is there any other councillor wishing to speak to the motion? Sorry, the amendment. Councillor Bissinger.
I just wanted to, I was just wondering if there was any chance of perhaps Councillor Chally making a slight change to her amendment which included both.
We can't do that mid-debate, and so there's only one amendment in front of us. No, so sorry, I think that opportunity is missed, Councillor Bissinger. But obviously, if this fails, you've got an opportunity to move your own amendment. Is there any other councillor wishing to speak to the amendment? There being none. Before I put the amendment to the vote, just for clarity, so if this gets up, basically it's saying that we wait until the briefing on the 2nd of August 2022 before we write, and if it's not, then there's no particular time constraints. Could be after, could be before. So I'll now put the amendment to the vote. All those in favour? Against? I believe the amendment's carried. Sorry, Councillor O'Connor, I didn't actually see which way you voted on that. Can I get you to confirm for me?
I was in favour of the amendment.
Okay, so I'll
Thank
take the
you, Mayor.
amendment as carried. So now that rolls up into the substantive motion as being the new point 4. So, councillors, we now have the rest of the motion is as it was. New point 4 being that the letters are not written, well, not sent, I believe, until the briefing, but otherwise the rest is the same. So I'm seeking anyone wishing to speak for or against the substantive motion that hasn't already spoken. Councillor McCafferty, you've already spoken, I believe, to the. Oh, sorry, you're right, to the amendment. So, please proceed.
Thank you. And through you. It's a hard one. It's a hard one to debate. It's. I am in support of the state legislation. I think it's important to decriminalise this kind of work because it occurs anyway. So it should be decriminalised, and we should be addressing this particular issue in the community or socially from an evidence base rather than people's views and things like that. It is an industry where harm does occur when it is unregulated, and so this provides us an opportunity, or the state an opportunity rather, to regulate things and put safeguards in place. So it's certainly not just listening to people's views, it's very much built from an evidence base. So, yeah, I think we want to keep people safe, and that's very important. And I think we do need to acknowledge that this actually does occur in the community anyway. It just does. So we need to make sure that people are safe while they're doing it. So that's more related to point 3, I suppose. That the council is concerned about the possibility of churches, schools, preschools and many other facilities and organisations being unnecessarily concerned or adversely affected. I hear that, but I'm not sure that that's sort of not already occurring anyway. So how much change is going to happen? I'm not sure. I'm not sure that there's going to be this enormous increase in sex work because it's been decriminalised. It's really just giving the people who are existing in that sector some safety. So, yeah, I'm really torn on this one. I agree with the legislation. Not sure how it's going to, if there's going to be real adverse effects, or whether we need precautionary measures. Just that term, I don't know, it just sort of makes me feel like there's a red flag, like a precautionary measure is that there's some sort of criminal activity, which is sort of the whole intent of this, decriminalising it. So I don't know if I've articulated that clearly. I do find this a very difficult topic to debate. But yeah, I'll just listen to the rest of debate really, but I just wanted to make those points. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McCafferty. Is there any other councillor wishing to speak to the item? Councillor Race.
I'm probably in a similar position to Councillor McCafferty because I fully support the decriminalisation of sex work in Victoria, and I just want to get this bit for the website because this will make more this will make it clearer than I possibly can. Decriminalisation ensures that sex work is safe work, and just like any other work, it maximises sex workers' safety, health, and human rights, while also reducing stigma and fear of criminal repercussions. Currently, you can only operate in this sphere if you have a licence. So those practising street-based sex work or without a licence are breaking the law and therefore do not have access to basic rights and entitlement. This legislation abolishes that and means that they're safe and they're legitimately practising their craft. It also, I think some of the language that we kind of use around this work often makes it seem seedy and sordid, and a lot of time it's not. A lot of time it's it speaks to people's human rights, and I think we need to think of this specifically in relation to the NDIS, where the federal court has ruled that sex work can be funded through the NDIS, and it's really important that we have those conversations about people's rights to this. And I think when we're talking about churches and preschools and those things, I have a difficulty with that because then we're stigmatising this kind of work again, and I think we need to be mindful of our community's concerns, definitely, but we also need to be proactive and, I guess, positive in our discussions around decriminalising sex work. So I am actually not quite sure how I'm going to vote as yet.
Thank you, Councillor Race. Is there any other councillor wishing to speak to the item? There being none, Councillor Maher, you reserve your right.
Thank you, through the Mayor. I'm glad that Councillor Gill has brought this to council because there's a lot of nervousness out there within our communities and what the impact will have on their amenities, livelihoods, I guess, and neighbourhoods. It's an opportunity to get in front of the state government to seek clarity around what they are actually doing about the legislation and decriminalising sex work. I think that it's a good opportunity to reach out to the state government at this point with an upcoming election so that we've got some answers for our community when it needs to be. So I really like what's been put forward to us this evening. Thank you, Councillor Gill.
Thank you, Councillor Maher. Councillor Gill, did you like to close? Would you like to close?
Through the chair. Very good debate. Great debate to have. And the points have been well raised. I put in the first clause that this council agrees with the intent of state legislation to decriminalise sex work. In saying that, what I mean is I want it to work. It may not work. The way it's framed at the moment, it may not work. It may bring the opposite. And if we don't look at it very carefully, and we don't have politicians putting a framework around it and saying exactly what it will mean to our community and every other community, then there will be a problem. People may be expected just to accept, but as was pointed out earlier, people in this room have children. People have expectations about what will happen in their neighbourhood. We've got to explain that. We're being lumped with the explanation. That's how I see it. The state government has done nothing to make that explanation. Councillor Holland asked me to explain what the legislation to decriminalise sex work means. To me, I'm taking it at face value. I think it's a good thing to decriminalise sex work so that it's safer. That's the basic thing. It will be safer for people in their working environment. But to work, there has to be more acceptance from our communities. If somebody wants to go into the state election and say, I'm opposing this legislation because there will be a brothel next to your state school, you're losing straight away. We've got to have a way of an explanation from the state government firstly, but also built-in protections from fear. I know what you're saying, we shouldn't have fear, but there will be fear. I wouldn't want to be the state candidate for the Labor Party saying we've just decriminalised sex, and you can have sex work in your community, in your residential area, and you can just put up with it if there's something going wrong next to you. Now, we're assuming that they will decriminalise. We don't know that. What's to stop the criminals from buying the houses and renting it out to people and taking the same deal that they've always done, and just spreading this? I want to know that this will be for the workers, and not have other people involved, and have it properly decriminalised. We haven't had that explanation. We just haven't had it. We've got legislation that doesn't, I think, to our community explain what's really going to happen. And it will happen after the state election. It'll unfold after the state election. And I think that
Thanks,
we will be
Councillor
left
Gill.
with the explanations, not the state government. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Gill. Councillors, that concludes debate, so I'll now put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Motion carried. Thanks, councillors. We'll now move to